Welcome to a Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm here to talk about the very first story published by Homer Eon Flint, titled The Planeteer. We are Telltale Books, bringing you the best in literature, literary topics, and graphic design and bookmaking.
If you want to support us, you can find us on Etsy and Pango, where you can find gently used, rare, and even top quality used books.
And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and maybe even that bell to be notified when new videos go live.
Thanks for joining us.
As I said, The Planeteer was Homer Eon Flint's first published work, appearing in All Story Weekly on March 9th, 1918, and it's a novelette-length work. It has a sequel to it titled The King of Conserve Island, which I'm having a lot of difficulty getting a hold of a copy of, so I don't know if I'll be able to report on the sequel. But I did get my hands on a copy of The Planeteer thanks to the 26th Golden Age of Science Fiction Mega Pack, an ebook published by Wildside Press that has almost everything by Homer Eon Flint in it, as well as a great essay by the granddaughter of Homer Eon Flint. Really interesting reading. So far, a really good book. And The Planeteer, I gotta say, is, well, to put it simply, this is very much a science fiction work. It's stylistically, it's a lot like all the pulp science fiction space operas of the 1930s and late 1920s. But remember, this is March 9th, 1918. I find this work to be groundbreaking. The basic synopsis is that you have these two men. One is an inventor, one is in charge of a government agency. And they're faced with a problem that California has mostly been wiped out by a rise in the water. It's been completely swamped. It's all underwater. Problem with that is that San Jose area of California, San Francisco Bay, the land in that area is responsible for 1/10 of the world's wheat production. So by that land being totally flooded out, you just lost 1/10 of the world's wheat, 1/10 of the world's food supply. So they need to find a solution. How are we going to replace that? We're not going to get that land back. How are we going to grow that food? How are we going to feed the people? And this is set in the future, a future where things are getting a little more overpopulated. And so it's either come up with a replacement for that wheat somehow, or watch as 10% of the world's population dies. So they each resolve to find a solution to this problem. And the two guys, one is John Babcock and the other one is, I only know him as Mr. Forbes. They're both in love with a woman named Ray. And they resolve that the one of them that comes up with the workable solution first will get her hand in marriage. And she agrees. She goes along with this too. She's perfectly fine with this. She's a part of the whole conversation about this. So another thing is happening at the same time. A rogue star or planetoid, hard to tell which. Flint uses the terms interchangeably. It's either a planetoid or it's a star. He calls it both. And the one does have a partner that is also called either a planetoid or a star. Well, one of them hits Saturn, which the collision is big enough that it causes Saturn to turn into a small star. Smaller than the sun, but it's still a star. And it leaves its orbit and goes and captures Jupiter into an orbit about this new star. And the partner object with this rogue star keeps going on toward the sun. It's going to loop around the sun and come back near Earth. So John Babcock, he invented a spaceship. And he decides, first of all, he goes to the moon and he finds out what the moon is composed of. Second of all, he goes to Mars, hoping that mankind could colonize Mars, but he finds out that there's a civilization there. And they're kind of a nasty civilization. They tried to get him involved in their workers' rebellion that's going on, and he doesn't like that, and he takes off. Well, the Martians don't like that, and they don't like Earth, and okay, so Mars is against Earth, and he doesn't come straight back to Earth. Instead, he goes to Jupiter. Now, 1918, remember, he lands on Jupiter and checks out Jupiter and finds out that aside from having kind of a denser atmosphere, it's just like Earth. And we can live on it and walk around on it. 1918, all right? Bear that in mind. So he comes back to Earth and he proposes a solution of utilizing that rogue planetoid / star coming around the sun. It's going to come close to the Earth. He's going to use his spaceships, which have kind of a gravitational pull ability, to yank that planetoid out of its path enough that it'll pass close enough to Earth to pull Earth out of its orbit on a trajectory towards Jupiter, with the idea of putting it in orbit around Jupiter, where mankind can then easily access Jupiter and grow more crops on Jupiter. Now, Forbes just had the simple idea of building floating farms and putting them in the ocean. Okay, so it's put to a vote for the whole world. Which would they prefer to do? And amazingly, the whole world decides to go with John Babcock's idea of moving the Earth to Jupiter. This sounds so crazy, so insane. And like I say, pulp story, the writing is not the greatest. It's pulp style writing. It's kind of typical of what you'd find in 1930s amazing stories or wonder stories, except that this is 1918. Nobody has done anything remotely like this before that I'm aware of. Closest thing I can think of to this would be H.G. Wells' short story, The Star, where a star comes close enough to Earth to cause major catastrophe all around the world. H.G. Wells' story is a lot more believable from a scientific standpoint. Flint's story has a lot of, along with the simplistic pulp style writing and the flat characters, you have some really, really questionable science going on here. It's pretty much garbage as far as accurate science. And of course, things like Jupiter having a surface that we could walk on. No, it's a gas giant. But we didn't know that back then. So you got to cut him a little bit of slack. But really, he could have done a little bit more scientific research for this story and come up with something a little more plausible. But that said, I found this story compelling. Not only is it fun from a pulp fiction kind of standpoint, not only has it got some really wild things going on, some crazy science, ridiculous ideas, but I found myself thinking, Arthur C. Clarke, this is so much like 2010 or 2061, the way that he's playing with planets and stuff, the way planets are being terraformed and modified and affected. Jupiter turned into a star in 2010. I mean, things like that are going on in this book in 1918. And if it were little better writing and more solid science, I would swear Arthur Clarke must have written this, you know? It felt so much like the sort of thing he might have done. And just the whole idea of an author playing with cosmology, moving planets, destroying planets. I mean, they blow up the moon, and the civilization on Mars, they have a ray which melts Phobos and Deimos. Okay, this is Edmund Hamilton. World record Hamilton would do this kind of thing 10 years later. Homer Eon Flint was already doing it in 1918 and wasn't even publishing in Weird Tales Are Amazing. He was publishing in All Story and doing this stuff. Nobody was writing anything like this before Flint. This is a trailblazer. This is groundbreaking. There was nothing like this. And the degree of imagination and just the story of scientists going so far as to solve problems by moving planets and destroying planets, and the idea of planets being converted to stars and stuff like that. Like I say, we find that appearing in Arthur C. Clarke in the 1980s. Big engineering projects like it took to blow up the moon in this story are reminiscent of the engineering project of the Fountains of Paradise, building an elevator into outer space. Or, like I say, 2010 Odyssey 2, where the monoliths come back and convert Jupiter into a star. Science on a cosmological scale. Engineering on a cosmological scale. This is the first time this is the earliest story I've encountered like that myself. If anybody knows of an earlier story like this, let me know. I want to read it. This is the first one. You got to know, though, this isn't like today's writing. It's pretty infodumpy, even for pulp fiction. It's very infodumpy. This, like I said, the science is crap. The characters aren't so bad, but there's no character depth here whatsoever. Don't look for that. They're just actors moving through the stage, kind of like a 1950s monster movie. War of the Worlds or movies like that, where they were just people doing their jobs. They weren't people with father issues, mother issues, whatever, They didn't have a psychological makeup that you were told of. They were just in there and they were doing their jobs. And that's kind of how it is here. They're just people, and they're people, but they're just doing their jobs. And the author doesn't get any deeper than that with the characterization. So don't go looking for strong characterization here. Homer Eon Flint is not Charles Dickens. But for what it is, in a pulp magazine at the time this was written, for somebody publishing his first story, publishing what is very clearly a science fiction story, very clearly the sort of science fiction stories that would be published all over the place in the 1930s, this is a really good example of it. It's a trailblazing first time, I think. And it is fun. It is good. For all of its faults, which are many, I'm not defending this as great literature, but despite all of that, I got to give this a top tail. I just liked it that much. And it is, like I say, it is important because it sets this story is going to set the stage for what follows for science fiction. Following this story are works like When Worlds Collide. Following this story is the work of Edmund Hamilton, R.F. Starzl, Jack Williamson, John Campbell, and ultimately leading on a path that would result in works by authors like Arthur C. Clarke and many other newer authors that are playing with worlds. So I recommend this story to it, but I recommend it with reservations. That you have to know that it was published in 1918. You have to know it was written for a pulp magazine by an author who had little experience writing, and it was meant to be an adventure. The science is crap. If you're looking for scientific accuracy, you'll have to look elsewhere. If you're looking for memorable characters, you'll have to look elsewhere. If you're looking for something that supported feminist causes or queer causes, you definitely have to look elsewhere. For what it is, it's an excellent example of the best of this kind of early pulp science fiction. And if you like that sort of thing, you should not skip The Planeteers by Homer Jan Flint. So this is where I say, have you ever read The Planeteers by Flint? If so, leave your comments. Tell me what you think of it. And yeah, I know there's going to be a fair number of people who would go and read this story and go, oh my God, that story is so bad. I'm not saying that it's great literature, all right? I'm not saying that this guy is Ernest Hemingway or anything. I'm saying that for what it is, it's better than a lot of other stuff that was published afterward. And it did some things that no one else had ever done. Even H.G. Wells has never gone here before. And that makes it worth it, I think. That makes it worth remembering for historical purposes and for the fact that it is just fun. You know, there's some things that today's audiences will read and just laugh at because it's so hokey. But that makes it fun. So come on back for more. I'm going to continue my Homer Jan Flint series. Like I say, the next one, I'm not sure if I'm going to get a hold of a copy. I'm not going to stall out the series waiting until the day when one comes available. I'll just skip over it and move on if I can't get one in time. But I will do the rest of Homer Jan Flint. I believe I have all the rest of his works already. Mainly in that 26 Golden Age of Science Fiction Mega Pack ebook. That's an excellent resource for Homer Jan Flint. And I'll be reading The Blind Spot, which he wrote with Austin Hall. I hope you'll come back for all of that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll be here doing these.